Those are the two things that matter most when you're going to college on if you're going to have success after it. How much did you pay and what degree did you get? Did you pay $100,000 for something that now you can't find a job with?
That $20,000 of debt between 2 credit cards and a car loan making $52,000, that's a lot. That's taking you years to pay off with that current income that you have.
Planning and saving for a wedding is like the first true financial test for like a soon to be married couple.
A lot of people tie up their income with these consumption, like whether it's clothes or these, whatever. And then it just leaves you with less and less every single month.
If for 2 years they really haven't walked away with anything, like it's just not viable in my eyes.
I'm not sure I should keep going down this route. Then you're probably not sure, and you probably shouldn't. Work the math backwards. Welcome to Just Another Money podcast with your hosts, Lauren and Nick. We're here to take real-world money situations and break them down into actionable steps you can actually use.
Whether you're budgeting, paying off debt, or saving for your future, we're all about making finances easy to understand and putting you in control of your money. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Today we're talking about the right and wrong ways to make large purchases. From buying new cars to spending tens of thousands of dollars on weddings, we're breaking down the best ways to save and pay for large expenses. But before we get into that, we had a question that was submitted to the show by a viewer. And just as a quick reminder, if you want to have your questions answered live on the show, you can go directly to our website, justanothermoneypodcast.com, and click the submit a question button. Or if you're a subscriber to our newsletter, you can just reply directly to any of those emails and that question is going to get sent straight to us. But Lauren, do you want to kick us off with the question for today?
Yep. So it says, hey, Lauren and Nick, I'm feeling super overwhelmed by my debt and I don't even know where to start. I have $25,000 in student loans at 6.5% interest. A $12,000 car loan at 4.2% interest, and a $7,500 in credit card debt at a whopping 22%. I can put about $800 a month towards my debt payments, but I'm not even sure how to use that money in the smartest way. Should I focus on paying off one first or spread my payments across all three? I really want to be debt free, but it feels impossible. Please help.
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I think they kind of hit that first part where they've laid out all the information in front of them. And now it sounds like, they got on a budget, or at least they went through their expenses and they know exactly how much they can put towards this debt. And from there, they can really start to map out a game plan. But, I think before they even start approaching the debt, the first thing I would ask them is, do you have any money set aside? Because most of the time, what I tend to see is like when someone gets into their debt payoff journey, they might make, a few months worth of progress. And then all of a sudden an expense comes up. They don't have any money set aside. And now they're kind of back to square one, or even worse, they're worse off than they were when they first started. So I would say for this person, get maybe 1 month's worth of expenses saved up off to the side as like a starter emergency fund. And, you could probably even just call that like $2,500, $3,000, something that's like very realistic to save up. And you could do it relatively quickly. And then, then you can kind of jump into your debt payoff plan, excuse me. But what do you think, Lauren?
Yeah, I think the same thing. We don't have too many details here, obviously, but I can always relate it back to my debt payoff journey, but I really wanted to be debt free. And the first thing I really did was take a look at my budget, and I really went through and saw where all of my money was going, what money I had coming in, and really got that laid out clear. Because this person said that they can put $800 a month towards their debt payments, but I'm just curious, like what their full budget looks like. We don't know how much they make and things like that. But what I did was I actually plugged some of these numbers into a debt reduction calculator. So let's say they already have like their month of expenses set aside or whatever, and they really want to hit this journey hard. And I'm going to assume that they only have the $800 to put towards this. So I just went ahead and put it in the calculator. I put that their minimum payment for their student loans was $250, the auto loan was $250, and then a credit card was $100 a month, which is $600. So they have an extra $200 to throw towards their debt to get it paid off. So if you plug it in as of today, it looks like and if we do the avalanche, which is the highest interest first, we would actually pay off that credit card by December of 2027. So that's 2 years or 2.5 years?
2.5 years,
yeah, to pay off that credit card. And then it looks like, after that, you would pay off the student loans and the auto loan. I actually would probably change this around a little bit and just pay off that credit card first because it's the highest interest. Then I might switch to paying off more of the car because I have the lower balance, and then work on my student loans after that. But regardless, this looks like a total payoff of July 2029. Now that's like 4 years from now. That's only if you can, get that $800. That assumes you don't get any raises. You're not going to have any side hustles to put towards this, etc. If you bump that up to, let's say, let me just throw it in here, to $1,000, that changes things. So your credit card is paid off in 2026. You're cutting a whole year off that.
Yeah.
And then, going from there. So I think that, it's really going to be dependent on how fast you want to get out of this, but it is possible. I know that it feels, especially somebody who doesn't make a lot, that can feel like a lot, but, this person does have options. It's going to take some time. You just have to really be patient. So that's kind of where my head's at with this.
No, that's a really good point. And I feel like when people kind of look at this pile of debt in front of them, like this person has, what is that, like $45,000 of debt? Like they see the big mountain in front of them and they don't see the next step that they have to take. Yeah. But I really like that you laid it all out from like a timeline perspective. Like, okay, if we can, pay an extra $200 a month on top of our minimum payments, then I know I can get this paid off by X number of months or X date. And then that can kind of, from one perspective, that can be a little like demoralizing because you might say, okay, that's 4 years from now, like that's a long payoff journey. But you can also see, okay, if I start to tweak the numbers a little bit, if I can throw an extra $100 or $200, like I can shave whole years off. Yeah. I think that's the part that can be, really exciting for someone when they're going through this is like, hey, can you throw an extra $100 a month towards this? And can you knock off 6 months or a year off your payoff journey? Like, I think that to me is the big part. But yeah, if this person's not on a really tight budget though, I think none of this is going to matter. Yeah. I think they got to get on a really solid budget. And then from there, like you said, if they can go from $800 a month to $1,000, like they're knocking years off of this.
Yeah, definitely. It's so funny because that was similar to what I paid off whenever I was on my debt-free journey. And it took me almost 3 years, and it's crazy that, 3 years feels like a long time, but during that I was so focused and, really wanting to get it paid off that 3 years went by really quick. And then, 4 years, 3 years, whatever you're going to pay it off in seems like a long time, but say this person is 25 and they're paying this off by the time they're 29 years old. They're going into their 30s debt free. Like that is absolutely insane. And they have so much potential with their money. So I think that's a good way to shift the mindset there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And like, like you said, those 3 years are just going to go by either way. So do you want to have put in the hard work and at the end of that 3 years, you're in a much better place, or do you want to kind of just be in the same spot and like, I don't really want to take the effort to really focus on it, but you're never going to get anywhere unless you do,
Yeah, exactly. Well, should we jump into the first scenario for today?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So this one says, should I finance a car or buy it cash? I have $50K in my savings and I'm looking at buying a new car for about $20K. My plan is to put down 20% up front, make the monthly payment until it's paid off, and invest the rest into the market now. A friend of mine keeps telling me this is a dumb idea with the interest rates on car loans being between 6 and 8%. He said if I have the money to buy it in cash, I should just buy it outright. Should I finance the car or suck it up and just pay cash?
Yeah, I see what he's trying to do here, right? So he's trying to take the 6 to 8% of the interest rate on the car loan, and instead of paying the car in full, he's going to take that interest rate, and then the money that he has in cash, he's going to put that into the market, and the hope is that he would make more than that 6 to 8% on the interest rate. But at this point, like with the interest rate so high, like you're making razor thin margins. Like it's very like, I don't know, you're playing for pennies here, and at that point, I just don't think it's worth it. Like kind of like what the friend said, like I think if you have the money to do it, then I think that's kind of the decision you should make. But this would be totally different if interest rates were lower and it was like 2%, right? And you feel comfortable taking on the risk and playing that game. And if your time horizon's long enough, like you're probably going to come out ahead. But with the interest rates being almost at what you could expect to earn in the market year over year, like I think it's just, like I said, you're playing for pennies here. I don't think it's worth it. What do you think?
Yeah, if you have the money now, he has said he has $50K. He's going to buy a $20,000 car. Oh, wait, what does he say? He wants to finance, like he's going to put $20,000 down and then finance the rest, or? I think the car is $20K and he wants to put 20% down and then that other 80% would. So I think that would be like 16 grand he would be able to throw into the market. Oh, okay. No. Okay. I read that wrong. So, I'm definitely going to be paying cash for this as long as, you have your full emergency fund, you have funds for other things that you need to have set up. So like you obviously if you had just 20K, you're not going to use all of that for your car, and then have nothing in savings. But yeah, I'm not going to mess around. Like you said, it's going to be very slim as far as like what you're going to make in the market on this. I'm probably going to be paying cash for that. I'm very debt adverse. Like I like to pay cash for almost anything that I can, like mortgages aside, obviously. But especially if you have the money there, just pay for it and don't worry about, 6 to 8% interest rates right now, they can be upwards of 10% at this point. Like I'm not messing around with something like that. But what would you say so let's say, someone, doesn't have money for a car at all and they need a new car. What are your thoughts on financing a car at that point for somebody? Not everybody can pay for a car cash, obviously.
No, absolutely. And I think if you have the savings set aside and you can afford to pay for it in cash, and what I mean by that is like you can pull from your savings and that doesn't mess up like your other the other goals you're saving towards, it doesn't mess up your emergency fund or you're not pulling from retirement, then I would say just buy it in cash, right? But like you said, the reality is most people don't have 20K sitting in their savings account that they could just pull out for a car. Yeah. And so, what I've found is I really like this rule that I heard is called the 23-8 rule. And basically it's 20% down, financed over 3 years, where the monthly payment is no more than 8% of your gross income. And I think when you kind of have this parameter of 20-8, I've also heard the 24-10, which gives you just a little bit more flexibility. I think when you can kind of approach it with that parameter in mind, then you actually have a budget for what you can afford. And instead of looking at, okay, what car do I want? It's what payment can I actually afford in my monthly budget? That's going to give me the flexibility to actually make progress on the other goals, right? Because, if you're spending 8 to 10% on your car payment, like you probably still had room to get an even nicer car or more expensive car. But what is that taking away from in your financial life? Like what else are you sacrificing? And if that's like, hey, I drive every day for work. And so maybe I'm okay sacrificing going out on the weekends for this nicer car. Cool. That's a trade-off that you can make. But I think what a lot of times happens is people will say, yeah, I'm going to make that trade-off. And the area I'm going to sacrifice is being able to save up an emergency fund or being able to put money into retirement. And then it's like, oh, expenses are just so high right now, instead of, well, you didn't need to get that car. Could we have looked at for maybe a more affordable car, or, a car that's 5 years old or 6 years old that's still reliable? I think I think you kind of have to approach this with some sort of parameters to make sure you're buying the right way.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if you can bust out a calculator here, but can we do some math on that to see like what it would look like? Like, I'm just curious because, everybody is telling, you hear so much these days, you can't get a car that's cheaper than $700 a month. At this point, if you want to buy a car. So let's say that we have like, I don't know, let me throw some numbers at you here. Let's say we have like a car that's $30,000. I would say that's pretty average these days between like, it's probably for like a used SUV, or like a used car, depending on what type of car you get. So 20% down of that and then finance over 3 years, like what would that payment be? Like, I'm just curious, like what a payment like that for a $30,000 car would look like being a pretty average car.
All right. So I ran some quick math. And so on a car that costs $30,000 financed over 36 months with a 7% interest rate, and you put down 20% or $6,000 in this case, you're looking at a monthly payment of $741. Now, in order for that to be 8% of your gross pay, you would need to be earning $112,000 per year. And so that, for a $741 monthly car payment, earning $112,000 per year, like you may not be there yet. That might also be what your car payment is. And so I think we can kind of work backwards to see, okay, what car can I actually afford? Let's take your income. Let's say your household income was $80,000. And can we find 8% of that, which 8% of that is about $530. Then we can kind of work backwards from there. Go check out some cars, see what those monthly payments come out to with a 20% down payment. That's how we can kind of figure out what a budget is. But no, I think it's really good to use real numbers here. That 23-8 rule can kind of sound a little bit abstract, but I think the whole point of it is to make sure that you still have the flexibility to do the other things that are still important, right? Because at the end of the day, like a car is a depreciating asset. You don't want all your money tied up in a car. Like you really just need it to get you from point A to point B reliably and safely. And I think there's so many cars that are more affordable that meet that criteria than people, give credit to.
Oh, absolutely. But I think you just have to look for it, and it's probably not going to be the newest SUV. Cars are expensive these days, especially we can't deny that, especially with those interest rates, but I do think that you can find something, like you said, work the math backwards. If you're going for a $30,000 car, and you can't afford the $741 payment, you might need to look at something a little bit cheaper than that. So yeah, I don't have a big connection to cars. I've probably said it before, but I just bought a new car, and I had my other one for years, and I drove it like 170 something thousand miles. So I buy a car and I keep it So this car, that was a car that I used to like commute a lot with. I don't commute anymore for work. So I'm going to have this car probably for like 15, 20 years. I really get my money's worth out of it. And it's a depreciating asset, and it's just something that gets you from point A to point B. So if you can get it paid off and drive it, then that's probably better than just continuously having a really high car payment.
No, that's a great point. And you know, what's funny? I feel like I always hear people say like, oh, I needed to get a new car, but I needed something that was reliable because my old car just kept falling apart or it wasn't safe or whatever. And so that's the justification for having a $750 monthly car payment and not having the income to justify that. And like you said, like, I mean, my car is about to be 8 years old. My wife's car is like almost 13 years old. Like, it doesn't have to be fancy. Like, it just has to get you from point A to point B. And at the end of the day, like, what you spend on your car, like, you're not going to get any return out of that other than saying, hey, I drive a really nice car. You know, like, you're not going to, there's no value that's going to go up. 99% of cars will not increase in value unless like you buy like a collector's item car. And I think for most people, it's just not worth it. And it's more about like, hey, I want to feel really good about driving this car while ignoring the rest of their financial picture. Like, if you can take care of the rest of your finances and drive a nice car, awesome. Go for it, right? But I think most people probably don't need to be driving a new car. Even a car that's like 3 or 4 years old, you can get for $10,000-$15,000 less than what a new version of that car is today. Like, that's how you save your money right there.
Yep, definitely. I agree with you.
Cool. Why don't we move into the next question? Love this question. This is something that my wife and I recently went through. So this person asks, how did you save for your wedding? My boyfriend and I have agreed that we'd like to get married in spring of 2026, if all goes according to plan. No official proposal yet, but since we are big on future planning, I know it's coming some point this year. We've been talking a lot about budgeting and saving for that big day, and it's seriously stressing us both out. We live in a very expensive area, and I definitely want a nice wedding, but I'm already starting to feel like I'm going to have to make compromises on some things. Even considered cutting down the potential guest list count from 100 down to 50. We are expecting to pay for everything ourselves, but I do think we have some generous friends and family who might help, but I don't want to expect or assume that. So how did you all save? We have some money in our savings, but that's our emergency fund. We're trying hard to cut back on eating out / going out, etc. But honestly, saving for a big wedding and honeymoon, which we want to go on immediately after to Italy, sounds overwhelming, even if it's in 2 years. And I don't know if we need to be more intense about saving.
Yeah, you probably do need to be more intense about saving. But yeah, so I definitely, I got married back in 2021. So I think I still have my wedding spreadsheet that my husband and I put together. But, I understand wanting a nice wedding, but it's good for you to start looking at the numbers. I think when you first, you want to get engaged, you start thinking about this stuff, you think about everything you want. But until you start looking at the numbers and see what this stuff really costs, I think that's whenever, the bigger picture comes in. But, get the numbers for your area. What do venues look like? How much is food? What about an open bar? Like photographers and DJs? It's going to depend on your area. And she said they live in an expensive area. So get a realistic view of what this looks like. Let's say in your area, it's $50K. Is that reasonable to you? Is that something that you can save for? I don't know what your incomes are. I don't know what you're thinking as far as that goes. Right. And then maybe from there, decide what you don't want to compromise on and then what you think you could live with. If you do want to scale back to 50 people, but still have a really nice wedding venue and stuff, maybe you do that. Food is one of the most expensive things on there. So if you have less mouths to feed, maybe that's best for you. Now, once you both decide on what you want for your big day, do the math. And then I'd say add at least 10 to 15% to that because you're never going to hit it on target. We definitely went over on ours as well. And then what is that number? And then calculate it backwards to see how much you'll be able to save. You're not just going to, not go out to eat maybe once a week or something. You're going to have to be very intentional about saving money for this. So for easy math, I just said, let's say they want to save $40K for the honeymoon and the wedding, right? And I'm going, like they said, I am not going to anticipate any money from friends or family unless you have had the conversation with your parents. I'm not talking to friends about this. Unless you've had, the conversation with your parents and they are saying, I'm going to give you 10K. We're going to give you 10K, right? That would, the 40,000 that you're going to save, that means you're going to have to save about $1,600 a month for 2 years to make that happen. So it's going to have to be pretty intentional. Cutting things out of your budget isn't going to be the end all be all that's going to save you, but I think it can definitely help. You really have to decide what you want and how much you're willing to put towards that and how much you're able to put towards that. So I hope that helps, figure out the numbers. But I don't know, Nick, what do you think? How should you save for something like this?
Yeah, I think planning and saving for a wedding is like the first true financial test for like a soon to be married couple. And it's the first test where you can really see, are we aligned on our financial views, like our goals for money, our beliefs around money. Yeah. And like, I know for my wife and I, like, we were very aligned when it came to saving for the wedding and what we thought of like other people giving us money for it. Like, we were both very much of the belief that like, hey, we don't want to take on, like, two things we said. We don't want to take on any debt, and we don't want to expect anyone else to help us. Yeah. And it even came to a point where we were like, okay, can we do this ourselves? And then instead of like kind of just openly accepting money from family or relatives, we were like, hey, if you really want to help out, can you buy like this specific thing? So they're on the one end, exactly how much you're contributing, and we also know like that we're not like taking advantage of the situation, I guess. Right. But yeah, I think when it comes to saving, like, weddings are like one of those industries where everything is marked up. And like you said, food, drinks, like caterers, even just like rentals for like chairs and stuff. Mm-hmm. All of that stuff is extremely marked up. And I think what you got to do is just identify between the both of you, like, what are the most important things? Like, what are our non-negotiables for this wedding? And maybe that's like a DJ, maybe that's the guest list, or the suit and the dress, or the cake, or the venue, whatever it is, like the type of food. Identify what are like your top like 2 or 3 non-negotiables. And then I think you got to be okay with having some flexibility on the other stuff. Like, if cool, I really want to have it at this place and I want to have it with this amount of people. Awesome. Those are my 2 non-negotiables. And so I can be okay with if instead of a cake, we do like cupcakes. And it's like, a fun thing. Like for our wedding, we literally did a small cake just for us to cut. And then we did donuts for everyone else, and people loved it. And we did a taquero, which was awesome, because like that's something that we really enjoyed. Like for us, we found ways to cut back on costs and still do it in a way that we thought was unique and fun. And so I think if they can identify those two or three things that are really important and give themselves flexibility on the rest, like I think that's one way to actually start to reel back in the budget.
Yeah. And I'm just curious if like, this person doesn't say, but I wonder what they think is like a lot of money. Like, are they okay with saving $1,600 a month? Or, I'm not sure what they make or what they thought, but it just seemed like they're like, oh, well, I'm just gonna have to cut some things out here and there. It's like, no, you need to be really, really intentional about how you're going to be saving for this, because that's a huge expense, especially in 2 years. And we didn't even talk about the ring or anything. So hopefully, he has money for that. But something they mentioned that I don't think we touched on yet, please don't touch your emergency fund. Like, that is so separate. And that's maybe what they're thinking, like, oh, we have some money set aside. That's not what you're using that for. Because the minute you use that for something, an emergency is going to come up, and then you're going to end up in credit card debt. So I really don't want to see you doing that.
Yeah, I feel like so many people approach, like, whether it's the wedding or any other savings goal, like I feel like they approach it a little backwards. They look at the thing that they want, they say, how much is that going to cost? And then they say, cool, how do I make that work into my budget? And I think you kind of got to go the other way around. Like, you got to look at your budget, look at your numbers. Like, do I have an emergency fund? If not, like, can I save for that? Am I saving for retirement, right? Like, is the rest of my financial life in order? And then what does that leave extra? And like, yes, you can make sacrifices on some things as long as like you're aware of what the sacrifices are, the consequences of it. Like, that's okay. And then once you have like a monthly average savings rate, then we can project that into the future. Cool, I got 2 years to save. Now I know what my budget is for it. Instead of doing it backwards, where you're kind of forced to either rely on other people, like especially in this case, if the goal is for your parents not to help out, well, now you might put yourselves in a situation where you have to have your parents help out, or you take on credit card debt, or you pull from the emergency fund, things that I've seen like all too often when it comes to weddings. Don't work it backwards. Instead, like, work it with real numbers like we did in the last situation. Like, figure out what can you actually save? How much time do you have? There's your budget for a wedding or really any other large expense.
Yeah. And it might even be worth, if you have a close relationship with your families, like, it might be worth saying, hey, if, just like a nice conversation, like if you were going to, give something, please let me know, because we're starting to, project out numbers and stuff for our wedding so that we can, know how much we need to be saving. So that way you actually know. Because, if your parents are planning to give you some, then this would obviously cut down your number of what you need to be saving every month. But
Yeah. And even on the other side of that, like they said, like they don't want to expect anyone to help them.
Yeah.
And, that was one thing that me and my wife talked about, is not expecting our parents to help. And so we like both went to our parents individually and we're like, look, like this is what we're doing. We're really excited about it. We've been saving for it since before we got engaged, because we knew that was coming. We just, it wasn't until it happened that we kind of told our families about it. And then we went to our families and we said, hey, like, we're not expecting you to contribute anything for it. And we don't need you to, we don't necessarily want you to. And I do think like that hurt my mom a little bit. She was like, well, we wanted to buy these things. And so, me and my wife were like, cool, what things are we cool with my parents buying and your parents buying that are reasonable, that we're, we understand, like, all right, maybe her mom buying the dress, it's probably like a thing that she wants to do. And then my mom really wanted to get the cake for the wedding and my tux. And so things like that, where it was a little bit more reasonable, but we had also kind of set our boundaries with our family, because that's another big part about the wedding planning process is most of the time boundaries just get thrown out the door.
Yeah, I hear that all too often. Now for us, I think it's fun to talk about our own numbers. We got married in the middle of like COVID.
Nice.
So there was a few things that we wanted to make sure that we had. So our wedding venue, we wanted it to be outside. Because at the time, remember, do you remember back then whenever like you could have like more.
Yeah, you like couldn't be inside.
Yeah, exactly. So I think total our wedding was like $23,000. But again, we had a few things we wanted. We wanted to have it outside. We wanted to have it attached to a hotel because, my husband's family was coming in from out of town and we wanted the easy access. We didn't want people to have to like Uber everywhere, so we wanted them to go from the airport to the hotel and they would be right at the venue. Right. And we also wanted a live band. So that's what we sort of spent our money on.
Yeah.
But we almost didn't, not that we didn't have a choice, but like, we had to pick an outdoor venue because at that time it was like limited. So we had to like cut our numbers a little bit to stay within those guidelines for our wedding. But yeah, there were some things we cut out. I didn't have a bridal party or anything. So it saved a lot of money there and obviously a lot of drama. So eliminated that. But yeah, that's what we really did. Like looked at what we wanted. We knew we would not want to compromise on, and then just kind of, like you did, we just had like a small cake and then we did a cookie table, which is very popular for the Pittsburgh area where we got married.
Nice.
It's just like a whole table of cookies and then you get like bags and they can take them with them and stuff. So that was fun.
Yeah. I mean, I have like no shame for how like, quote unquote cheap we went with our wedding. Like the ceremony venue, like it was an awesome venue and it happened to be free if you had it with less than 20, it was like 25 people max. And so we did the ceremony very like personal, just our two families and grandparents. And then the actual party, we had like 70 people, I want to say, which was a good size for us. But like I said, we got like donuts. We had a taco guy there. Like we were our own DJs, which was actually kind of fun because people came up to the iPad and like put the next song up. And so it was kind of fun. But when I tell people that like, oh yeah, we spent like 20 grand and that was the whole like start to finish, like wedding, the ceremony, everything. That was also the honeymoon and our dress and tux and her rings, or her ring and my ring. Like some people are like, oh man, you cheaped out on the ring, huh? And I'm like, I have no shame about it. Like we both agreed that why are we going to spend 40 grand on a wedding when that could go to the down payment on our house, or that, like we both just felt like that amount was silly for us. And like, if that's, if you want to spend that amount, like no shame to you, right? Like as long as you're taking care of the other expenses in your life, the other financial things in your life, I don't think there's a problem with it. It just for us felt like way too much money to spend. Yeah.
I know people that spend more on the ring than my wedding and and my husband's ring all combined together. But anyway, we're off topic now, but
yeah, let's move into the next one. All right, taking a quick break from today's episode, Lauren and I have some exciting news we'd like to share with you. If you're feeling stuck with your finances and don't know where to start, we have you covered with our one-on-one financial coaching.
These are no strings attached coaching sessions that you can sign up for today. No ongoing commitment. You simply book a session whenever you need one.
Each call is 90 minutes, and by the end of it, you'll have a clear budget to work with and a solid plan to start paying off your debt. Plus, we'll make sure you walk away with some awesome tools to keep you on track, including our budget dashboard and expense tracker, as well as our debt payoff optimizer.
And the best part, you'll get to work with both of us on the call. Together, we'll help you develop the best possible strategy forward, answer your questions, and make sure you feel confident about managing your money.
So if you're ready to get a handle on your budget and kickstart your financial journey forward, check out the link in the show notes to book your first session.
We can't wait to get started with you. Now, back to the episode. All right, this one says, should I really not worry about student loan debt? I'm in the middle of applying for college right now. I'm trying to find a balance between actually applying for colleges I really want to attend and applying for ones my family could actually afford. I was talking to my teacher about this, and she said I shouldn't worry about repaying my loans after college. If loans are going to help me get through school, that's what I need to do. I know student loans are with you for life until you pay them off, and I hear so many young adults struggling to repay their loans and find jobs. I don't want to be repaying student loans the rest of my life, but I also know my family can't fund my entire cost of tuition. Should I really not worry about student loan debt?
What kind of advice is that from a teacher, not to worry about what you and your family can afford? Like, I mean, I don't want to make assumptions, but this very well might be a teacher who got on one of those those programs where if you work for 10 years, you make your payments on time, they'll wipe out your debt, which that's a very privileged situation to be in one sense, because you wipe out what could have been $50, $100, $150,000 worth of debt. Like, yeah, I think when it comes to considering, like when it comes to applying for school, when it comes to considering if you're going to take out loans, like really the only thing that matters is return on investment. Yep. And I feel like not enough people talk about that. And it certainly, when I was applying for college, the push was, can we get everyone accepted? And it didn't matter where you went. It didn't matter like what you were applying for. That was the goal. Mm-hmm. And there was no talk about, hey, is that degree that you're applying for, are you actually going to be able to make money with that? And given that you may not make enough money with that, and you're going to be taking out $100,000 of student loans, like, is that the right decision for you? Or should you maybe go to like a community college, then transfer in, or even just go to a state school for the 4 years and save on money? Return on investment is just not a conversation that enough people have when it comes to college. But I do think that's changing, because people have seen, like, not to say college is a scam. Like, I know there's people who are kind of divided on that, but I do think for certain degrees or certain fields, like, you just don't need to go to college for that. And I think others, like, you absolutely have to have that piece of paper.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is a huge topic of conversation. So I feel like I'm kind of in the middle of this. Like, so my parents didn't go to college. They're not, well educated about student loans, about going to college or anything, but they've heard that, from everybody, going to college is your way to make more money. So of course they want that for their kids. So as a millennial, I feel like I'm really in that generation where we were really pushed to go to college, no matter really what the cost of it was. And then we're getting this advice from people that don't have the experience with student loans, and then the cost of college rising, right? So I think a lot of people who are like millennials, like I would say probably between like 30 and 45, got themselves into kind of a pickle with student loans. So they're taking out a bunch of debt, going out of state, and then not fully realizing that I don't get $100,000 job after college. So I can pay these loans that I have. So I think a lot of people are there. Like you said, I think it's changing. I have a niece who graduated college like 2 years ago, and she was with my help, of course, was very good about, I'm going to go to a community college, get all of my gen eds, all of that stuff out of the way, and then I'm going to finish at a state school. And she came out of college with very, very little debt, right? Yeah. And there's people my age who are struggling in over $100,000 worth of debt, and they do not see a way out of it. So yeah, I think you really have to weigh, look at the majors. Just a simple Google search can tell you, what does this psychology major make out of college? And you're going to be like, oh, okay, so maybe that's not the best option. Or if that's truly what I want to do, can I do it a cheaper way by living at home and commuting to the local 4-year university, or going to that community college and getting some of the gen eds out of the way? They're going to count for the same exact thing whenever you transfer to, another university. This is a big conversation, but I think it is shifting because so many people are in a really bad situation.
Yeah. And like you said, like, I feel like a lot of people were kind of sold the lie that if you went to college and you studied hard and you graduated, like, you would be successful. And there's no talk about what you studied or how much you paid. And I think those are the two things that matter most when you're going to college, on if you're going to have success after it. How much did you pay and what degree did you get? Like, is that actually a viable degree in the marketplace? Like, are people hiring in that position, or did you pay $100,000 for something that now you can't find a job with, and you're working minimum wage jobs or entry level positions in fields that you didn't study for? I think that's what we find all the time. But yeah, I think when it comes like to this person's point, like, I think you need to consider the amount that you're willing to take on. And when it comes to trying to justify what's an okay amount, obviously I think so many scholarships get left on the table every single year. And I think in your senior year of high school, it's worth your time to be applying to as many scholarships as you can. Like when you're not in school, you should be applying to scholarships because there's millions of dollars left on the table every single year in unclaimed funds. But I think beyond that, you got to really assess where you and your family are at. Like, are your parents willing to help, or is this like completely on you? And I think the rule of thumb that I've always heard and that I recommend to people is that the most amount of student loan debt you should take out should be no more than what your expected entry level position salary would be when you get out of college. And so if for your position, cool, like expected entry level salaries around $60,000, that's kind of the most you should accumulate in debt across those 4 years. And I think that really can kind of put it into perspective, like how much you can actually afford to spend on college. Because the problem is some people will take out twice as much as what they're expected to earn. And that's where you get these situations where it's like, I've paid more than what I actually borrowed in the first place, or I've been paying off my loans for 20 years and they're still not any lower, like that's how you end up in these kinds of situations.
Yeah, I love that recommendation about, looking at the entry level salary when you're done, because too many people are coming out making $40K and they've got $80,000 in student loans. And it just starts you off on such a bad path. You literally don't have money for anything else. And then you're trying to do all the rest of the things that society tells you to do, you don't have the money to do it. So yeah, I think this is, and see what the projections look like. Engineering obviously is such a great major. We all know that. Computer science, you can go crazy, get crazy high incomes with those. But, what does it look like for somebody in your field? For an example, in psychology, like what can you really do with that? A lot of people have to go on to grad school and then you have to take out even more loans for that. So I think it's worth doing the research. And like I said, whenever I was going to school, that wasn't really in the picture. It was just like, go get a degree and then you can figure it out afterwards. But I think we're really I think a lot of more people are doing what you're saying, Nick, and really doing the research on their end to figure out, is this really worth my time?
Well, and more than that, I think a lot of people are also recognizing like how valuable it is to go to a trade school and learn a trade, like being a plumber or an electrician or something like that, where you're working with your hands. And like, when people kind of compare the two, it's like, oh, well, college education is more of like a higher level of education is what it's usually called. And learning a trade isn't considered as high. But the truth is most college graduates come out earning $40,000, $50,000, $60,000. And if you go to a really great trade school and you are in a profession of high demand, like you could be making like 80 or 90,000 with just a few years of experience. And you're set on a trajectory to continue growing for a lot of these positions, where maybe you're working for the state or the local government. In a lot of these positions that are state jobs, they're unionized. They usually have really great benefits. Like I don't think there's enough consideration going to people who want to work in trade jobs,
Yeah. So more of the story, like we're not against student loans, but do your research and make sure it's well worth your time and the energy it's going to take to pay those back before you take those out. So.
Oh, absolutely. Cool. Why don't we move into the next one? What is the best way to save for a house? I'm 22 years old and make $73,000 a year. I'm putting 15% of every paycheck into a Roth 401k with a 6% match. My monthly living expenses come out to be around $1,500 for rent, parking, and utilities. I expect multiple promotions in the next 5 to 8 years, which is my time horizon to buy a house. Ideally, I'd like to skip the starter home and get my forever home around 30 years old. What I'm planning on doing is investing a percentage of my paycheck into an investment account and buying various ETFs to save up for a down payment. Is this the right move?
Yeah. I love the forever home thing.
Very optimistic.
Yeah. My life, I'm living in a completely different city than I was when I was 25 years old. Like you just don't know what's going to happen. But regardless, I understand you don't want like a house you have to put a ton of money into and like a rickety old house. You just want something more secure. I'm just going to go with that. So, I think this is a really good question because 5 to 8 years is that timeline, Nick, where we always say like you could potentially put it in the market. If she had said 3 years, like I'd say probably just skip that step and start saving into your high yield savings account and go from there. Yeah. But, I think this person and they may have looked at numbers, already, but how much do you want to spend on your home? Because this is going to be how much you're going to need to save, obviously. So, have you done the calculations on what you can even afford? I know you make 73 right now, but you said over the next few years, you're going to receive some promotion. So, what does that look like? And are you going to have a partner later on? That might also change how much you can afford for a home. So let's say that, you're in the ballpark somewhere of $300,000. How much do you want to put as your down payment? 15,000 is that 5%, and then 20% is about 60K. So let's pretend in this example that they want to put 10% down at about 30,000. Plus, let's say 15,000 for closing costs. So conservatively, this person needs to have about 50,000, give or take, in the next few years as they approach the home ownership, if they would like to do the 10% plus their closing costs. Now, if you're truly 8 years out or, 5 to 8 years out, I'm okay with putting it in the market. The rule of thumb is always like anything, if you need it before 5 years, probably not do that just because there's too much risk there. But this is a great opportunity to grow your money a little bit. So I'm probably going to put it in something like an S&P 500 or total stock market, something like that. But I ran a quick calculation on this. So for an 8-year time frame, let's say this person puts $500 monthly into the market, and I gave it like an 8% average, rate of return. That would return, you would get about $66,000 at the end of that. And your contribution would only be $48,000. So there's about $18,000 of growth there. So probably worth your time to actually do what you said here and take this approach to putting it into the market.
Yeah, no, I think, when it comes down to the question this person's asking, like, is this the right move? I think that's a great move to make. Like, know your time horizon, you want to invest over that entire period, and you want to save up a down payment. Like, that's the way to do it. There's just a few things in here that, like, I would kind of push back on against, right? Like, you're making $73,000 per year now. Like, yes, you should expect that your income is going to grow in the next 8 years, but to say 5 to 8, or to say that they're going to receive multiple promotions over this next 5 to 8 years, like, don't factor that into the plan until that money's actually hitting your bank account. Yeah. And then there's this idea of the forever home, which is something that I personally just don't believe in. Yeah. Like, this person's 22 years old. Are you married? Do you have kids? Because those are the two biggest things that are going to affect like your desired living situation, right? Because if you're not married and you're just looking at, cool, that's going to be my forever home where I'm going to really enjoy it. And then you get married and you have that home, like maybe your wife doesn't like this house, or maybe you two want to buy a home that's yours together. So that's kind of the one thing that I would push back against is this idea of a forever home. Like, buy a home that you really enjoy, that you're happy with, and then kind of see what happens and what needs to change in the next 5, 10, 15 years. I think when people attach this idea of a forever home to the thing that they're buying, or a forever car or forever whatever, that's what allows them or gives them the justification to make an emotional decision. And then that's when they end up spending more or putting themselves in a situation where they end up house poor. Yeah, I don't think the strategy that this person's looking at is a bad idea at all. I think that's the way to do it. I would just say they should maybe adjust kind of their expectations around making this purchase when the time comes.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, they don't say, but I'm wondering if are they living at home? I have no idea. Wait, monthly living expenses count? Oh, no, they are renting. Okay. Yeah, I don't really have a problem with this. Like, I was going to say, like, if they are living at home, like maybe they do want to like live on their own so they can learn what it's like to like run a household, but seems like they're already doing that. So yeah, they're on the right track. I love how they're planning this out though, because at 22 years old, I don't even know what I was doing at 22 years old, but it was not saving for a house over the next 5 to 8 years. So I love the mindset here.
Yeah. And I'm really glad this person's, he or she, they're talking about putting the money into the market, and I would assume into a taxable brokerage account, because things might change in 5 to 8 years, right? Like they may not, in 5 to 8 years, they're still going to be like within their 20s, maybe just turning 30. Like maybe at that point, they're like, cool, right now is not the time that I want to buy. Maybe the market's not where they want it to be at. And so having that money in a taxable brokerage account, having exposure to the market, but still having flexibility on when you can pull it out, like that's where you give yourself options. I think it would be the wrong decision for this person to be saving up all this money in cash, because with that time horizon, like they're missing out on so many gains. But yeah, I think this person's headed down the right path for sure. And at 22 years old, like it sounds like if they went to college, like they're fresh out of college, they're just getting into adulthood, like putting away 15%, getting a 6% match and making like above what most Americans make. I think that like this person's winning. And if they keep on with this, like by the time they're 30, like they're going to be so far ahead of other people their age.
Oh my gosh. I don't even know what I was making at 22 years old. It was definitely not over 30,000. I'll tell you that. So yeah, they're like light years ahead. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Let's jump into the next one here. So this one says, should I take out more debt to fund a side hustle? I'm looking to fund a side business selling all natural hair care products. It's something I've been working on over the past 2 years, selling at local farmers markets on the weekends. About a year ago, I put $5,000 worth of equipment and materials on my credit card to really get the business going. Since then, I've made my money back, but put it back into the business and haven't paid off the debt. In total, I have about $20,000 in debt between 2 credit cards and a car loan, and I make about $52,000 per year from my main job. Is it a good idea to take out more debt to keep the business going? I would need to put another couple $1,000s on my credit card to buy more materials. I started this side business to make extra income, and while I can definitely make money from it, I'm not sure I should keep going down this route.
That's a tough one. But if you're sure that you can definitely make money from it, where's the money that you haven't been making, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. My rule of thumb is always that, like, if you're going to start a side hustle as a way to earn extra income, especially if it's to get out of debt, like, start with something that isn't going to have a huge overhead cost, like where you don't have to invest in equipment up front. Like, can you take the skills that you have now or the resources that you have now? Like maybe you want to get into photography, or maybe you want to give lessons on the side, or be a tutor or something, right? Can you take the resources that you have now and throw that out there, earn some additional money without having to put a huge upfront cost? Because I think that's what happens all too often is people look at how can I make extra money? And that ends up being something that just sucks so much money out of their bank account on a monthly basis. And now they're not making any progress on the debt.
Yeah. Nick, you know that I love saying that, like, whenever someone like frames a question in a certain way, like, I think they already know the answer to it. And that's exactly what this situation is for me. Like, I'm not sure I should keep going down this route. Then you're probably not sure, and you probably shouldn't, you know, like, I think that they know that as they're asking this question. Yeah, I don't know. Side hustles are weird. And I think about this documentary. Do you remember those leggings, like LuLaRoe or something they were called? I watched a huge documentary about, like, how people would literally buy like thousands of dollars worth of leggings, and then they had to sell them, and then, like, they couldn't sell them and they lost all this money from them. So, like, the side hustle ended up being a nightmare. Yeah. So those are the kind of things I think about. But yeah, I love, you know, like you mentioned, how about something with low overhead costs to try it out, and then see if it's like a good move for you, rather than putting all of this money into something for it to not, you know, give you anything in return.
Yeah. I mean, of all the side hustles to start, this one, selling all natural hair care products, like, I imagine the cost of materials, that's a cost right there. Then you have to have, I'm sure, some sort of equipment to actually create this. And then there's a chance that, like, someone uses your hair care product and then they sue you because they got results that they weren't expecting, or their hair falls out, or you did something a little bit wrong. Like, the risk with this side hustle is, I feel like, not worth it. Like, I think you should start a side hustle from a place of financial stability, where you're not trying to do this to get out of debt, and you actually have the funds to bankroll this thing when it's not going to be making any money. Because most people start a side hustle and it's not going to make money right away, right? Especially if it's something like this with such a high overhead. Yeah, you said it. This person, it sounds like they know what they shouldn't be doing, which is putting more money on their credit cards. Yeah. Like, if they're making $52,000 a year, I think they need to focus on how can I keep more of my paycheck and put that towards debt, not can I find opportunities to, and I hate to say it, but it almost sounds like to waste money, like how this side hustle has been. Because if for 2 years they really haven't walked away with anything, like, it's just not viable in my eyes.
No. And I was going to say, well, first off, that $20,000 of debt between 2 credit cards and a car loan, making $52,000, that's a lot. So if you're going to add more to that, that's taking you years to pay off with that current income that you have. But what I was going to say was, you know, if this wasn't hair care products that someone could have, like, a damaged scalp from, I was going to say, like, potentially they get this on Etsy, and try to go that route, or, like, put it on social media, you know, like, try to start there instead of, like, buying more product or whatever. Like, try to see if you can sell things in a different way rather than at this farmer's market. But yeah, I think I get a little weary about those types of things. Like you said, people are sue happy these days. So if anything goes wrong, you're going to be in a lot of trouble then. So, or unless you're covered, I don't know, you know, what you got going on the back end there, but you know, that was just something I was thinking about.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think this person should definitely focus on paying their debt off before they sink any more funds into this business. Like, if they were saying, like, hey, I'm walking away with an extra $1,000 per month. Yeah. I just need to invest some of that into buying new equipment or new materials or ingredients or whatever. Cool. Like, that's an actual business that you're making money from. And now it makes sense to maybe put some more money into the business, generate more return on that investment. But yeah, if after 2 years, like if you're saying like, well, I can make money from it, it's just going back into the business. Like, have you actually ran the numbers to see, are you cash flow positive, or are you putting all the money, you know, investing the money back into the business, which I feel like people, you hear that all the time on like Shark Tank, where all the money's being invested back in. Okay, if you didn't invest that money back in, would the business still have succeeded, or did it require you to continue pouring funds in for it just to stay open? So yeah, I think you said it. This person knows what they need to do, or rather what they shouldn't be doing moving forward.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Let's move on to our last question for the day. So this person asked, should I finance a new iPhone or just pay cash? I'm 24 years old with a solid income. I need a new phone, but I'm not sure if I should try to finance it or just buy it outright. To finance it, I could either get a plan through my credit card with a high interest rate or open an Apple Card and finance it for 0%. I've already opened 3 credit cards this year as I was trying to take advantage of points and cash back, and I could buy it now with 5% back on a card I already have, but as I don't have any debts, I wasn't sure if it would be better to finance it to help my credit history. I have good credit now, but I want some input on whether it's worth the hit to open another card and finance the phone.
Yeah, this is a good question. So like they have a bunch of goals here to buy a new phone and to increase their credit. Anyway, I heard one time something that said like, don't finance consumption. And that like, I really loved that perspective. You know, I think a lot of people tie up their income with these consumption, like whether it's clothes or these, you know, whatever. And then it just leaves you with less and less every single month.
Yeah.
Because usually a new phone is not a necessity unless you've like broke yours or it's like, you know, you can't upgrade it anymore. You know, I personally pay for phones and things like this in cash. Save up for it over time. A phone is not that expensive. I mean, these days it's like $1,000, but you could save up for that over a year if you needed to. You know, when your phone's coming up on, I think I have iPhone 13 right now. I usually don't upgrade for years and years just because I don't like transferring everything over, but I pay for them in cash and I use them to the end of their limits, right? But, you know, I get trying to build some credit here. Don't love that this person said that they've opened multiple cards this year because they're trying to take advantage of things. Like, do you have credit card debt already with these?
Yeah.
Like, I guess that's my question. But if you're trying to build credit, you know, I don't have a problem if you want to do the 0% Apple Card. I'm not putting it on that high interest card. Absolutely no way, unless you're paying it off as soon as you put it on there. But you know, you have to watch for the promotions on those things. Cause yes, it's 100 or it's 0% right now, but how long is that for? You know, what you could do is, you know, personally, what I would do is save that money, make sure you have the money for it. And then you could potentially take out the card if you want for the 0%, build your credit month over month. Say it's like a 6-month promotion. Just make sure that, you know, you pay it off within those 6 months. But if you have the money set aside, you're able to do that because you already have the money there. And then if something were to happen, you obviously can just pay it off right away. I put my, you know, if I buy an iPhone outright, which I've done within the past few years, I'll put it on my credit card and then I just pay it off right away, you know, but I have that money set aside for things like that. And those are sinking funds that, you know, you can just set aside for things like this if you need something like that in the future. But we have to get out of the mentality of financing everything just because we can afford the monthly payment, because that proves false time and time again, because you're financing the smallest things. Like I'll buy a pair of leggings and it literally says use Afterpay and pay $12 a month. And I'm like, this is insane. You know, like we need to get away from that type of mindset. And I think, yeah, phone's a little more expensive, but I think it falls in the same line there. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, a phone is in the same bucket as a car for me. Like they're a depreciating asset and they really only serve to get you from point A to point B, right? And in this case with the phone, it's can you call the people you need to call and text the people you need to text.
And scroll on Instagram mindlessly for hours.
Scroll on Instagram and I mean, whatever, right? Like I think in my mind, like there's no need to finance something that you could save up for over the course of a year. And like you said, you have an iPhone 13. I think I have like an iPhone like 11 or 12. Like my phone is pretty freaking old, but it works great. And it does everything I need it to. And like, it's fine for me. And I feel like people get stuck in like the Apple ecosystem where they're upgrading one device every year, whether it's a phone, an iPad, a watch, a computer, you know, all of their things you can upgrade every single year when the new one comes out. And I just feel like it's not worth it for something like this. And you know, this person talked about putting this on a credit card and getting, you know, their 5% cash back and like trying to do this strategically to like at the end of the day, like they're talking about dollars here, right? Like 5% back on on $1,500, like is really not much there.
Yeah.
But I think the only thing worth looking at is like, I know Apple's financing can actually be pretty favorable. Like they do 0% interest over the course of, like, I know for like a MacBook, you can do 0% financing for 12 months. It's a fixed monthly payment. As long as you make that payment, you don't get charged the interest. And that's kind of the caveat, right? Like they're not here to be your friends. They're hoping you don't make that one payment or you're a little late on one, and then they can charge you all that interest. But that's kind of the only one that I would consider. Like if you can't afford it, or you want to try to play the game of 0% financing, and I'll take the money that I actually have for it and throw it in the market, trying to make that spread. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't be putting this on a credit card or financing through a credit card. Like with most carriers, they give you like an incentive to upgrade through them. And then you can roll that monthly payment into your phone bill. Like at least that's a way to make it a little bit more manageable if you have to finance the card or the phone, excuse me. But yeah, I wouldn't, if you have the cash for it, just like with the car we talked about, if you have the cash for it, I would just pay for it now.
Yeah. And just be done with it. I was going to ask that, Nick. What are your thoughts on, cause I know you can finance it through like AT&T or Verizon for however much per month over like a 2-year span or something. Do you like something like that? I feel like I don't. And I'll tell you why. Back in the day, I don't know if you know this, but like back in the day, you could get like insurance on your phone. So if anything happened to it, like it would, you could replace it. For iPhone, or say you do an iPhone now, they automatically put that on there with your payment, and then you have the insurance, because obviously that phone is not yours. It's like theirs technically. Yeah. So if you break it, they want to make sure it's covered. So that's what I didn't like about it. Like it's not just the phone. It's like they're requiring you to have it like insured through them as well. And I don't do that because I keep really good care of my phones and I have Apple Care and stuff. But like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, when I was younger, I was always on those plans where it's like every 2 years you can upgrade.
Yes.
And it was like the family plan that I was on. And you just consistently, you had a higher monthly phone bill because you were always financing a phone. And it's kind of like the same deal when people always finance a car, like they always lease a car. It's like, I get to have a new car every 3 years. Yeah. And you get to live with a monthly car payment for the rest of your life. Right. Like I think if you can afford to pay for it in cash, you should. And I think beyond that, like you should look at, because a lot of times they do have some really great incentives through like Verizon or AT&T or T-Mobile, where you trade in your old phone. Yeah. They'll give you, a better incentive to go through them for it. And then it can actually make sense. But beyond that, like the only other one I would look at is the Apple Card. And like, I'm not a huge fan of financing things at 0% just to make the spread, but that one's actually like, in my mind, like if you can get something for 0%, and it's a fixed monthly cost and you just have to make the monthly payment. Like if you need to go on a financing option, then I would take the 0%, right? Yeah,
definitely. I actually, my last iPhone that I bought, one of my friends worked at like the Apple store. So I used like his discount, because you're allowed to have a family and friends discount. So maybe find a family member or friend that works there and then get a little discount on your phone and pay it outright.
Yeah. I mean, I think you said the iPhones are like $1,000. I was going to say they're like probably like $1,500. Like, I don't know. They're so wildly overpriced. Like if you can get a phone that's a few years old, you could buy like the last year's model of phones. Like you're going to save so much more money. But like, I remember before I had an iPhone, I had like the Motorola Razr when Motorola was still around. And then before that, I think it was also Motorola because my aunt worked at Motorola. I had like the Pebble. I think that's what it was called, where you would like slide it down and then it would flip up. That was the time, but I don't think, I think financing phones are so silly. Like take good care of them, save up for it, and then buy one every like 4 years if you can, instead of every year. Yeah,
I just looked on the Apple website, and it's the new 16 Pro is $999 or $41 or $41 a month for 24 months. But the regular 16 is $799, and you could finance it for $33 for 24 months, whatever.
Oh, I see. But you're getting 128 gigabytes. You can't do anything with that anymore.
True. I mean, I have like all these storage. How many cloud storages do I need to have these days? I have Apple, I have Google. Like I'm like, yeah, that's where all of my storage is. So yeah, I have this. My phone now I think does have a lot of storage. But if you back up your photos and stuff, like you don't need that much.
Yeah, that's true. Now I was looking on here as well. So like, for example, if you got the newest iPhone, 256 gigabyte, it's $1,099. You don't do any trade in. They have the financing option of $45.79 per month for 24 months. And it's called their pay over time at 0% APR.
Wow.
But you are keeping a monthly payment for your phone for 2 full years.
Yeah, that's crazy for me. I'm not doing that.
Yeah. So like, $45 a month really isn't too expensive. Like if you need to finance it, that's not a bad option, but you're going to be paying that for 2 years. And then at that point, you're probably going to be bought into this idea. You're cool with just having that $45 a month. You're just going to finance the next one too.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Cool. Well, anything else to add, Lauren?
No, I don't think so.
Cool. I think that wraps up today's episode. And as always, just one simple ask. If you found any value from this, if you laughed a little bit, if you could share this with a friend and please subscribe, that'd be the biggest way you could help us grow.
Yeah, and if you want to have your money question answered on the show, you can visit our website, justanothermoneypodcast.com, and click the submit a question button. And don't forget to join us for the next episode of Just Another Money Podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations provided on this podcast are for entertainment purposes only and do not constitute professional financial advice. Any financial decisions you make based on the content of this podcast are your responsibility. We strongly recommend consulting with a licensed financial advisor or other qualified professional before making any significant financial decisions. By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge that we are not liable for any financial outcomes.